Welcome to the grassroots call for November. And as always, or for those of you who are joining us for the first time, we have a roundup of progress we're making in our collective efforts to end poverty around the world. And as well as that, we'll be hearing from not one, but two speakers this month who are going to help us make sense of this month's campaign action, which I'll introduce a little bit later on. So for those of you whose first call this is, I'm just inviting someone else into the call. For those of you who are new to this call, a big welcome. My name's Naveed Chowdhury. I'm the head of campaigns at Results UK. I'll start off with a few housekeeping messages. Please keep yourself muted during the call. If you have any questions or comments, please use the chat box. We've got that open. And captions are turned on. If you want to see those, you can just turn them on and off for yourself using the Zoom toolbar. We're recording the call, so if you prefer not to be visible, please feel free to turn off your video. If anyone would like to introduce yourself, either just by saying hello or writing in the chat box, please feel free to do that as well. Hello, Megan. So welcome, everybody. So before, as I said, before I introduce the main topic of this evening's call, I'll start out with our usual roundup of the updates on Results' advocacy on global poverty issues. For those of you who were on the call last month, we heard from Lucy Drescher, who is our head of parliamentary advocacy at Results, and she gave us a rundown of how the political changes in the government after the reshuffle in September made a difference to the advocacy work that we do. So as you know, we have a new Foreign Secretary, Yvette Cooper, who's obviously a very experienced politician, but without much experience of working on global development issues specifically. So that's why for our last month's campaign action, we suggested welcoming her to her new role to let her know that there is public support for the very important part of her portfolio, which is international development, alongside all the international diplomacy, which is perhaps a better known part of the work of the Foreign Office. As Lucy pointed out last month, we want to make sure that the UK is acting as an effective and reliable partner together with developing countries within the budget that we currently have in the UK, but moving as swiftly as possible to restoring the UK's official development assistance ODA budget back to its legally mandated level of 0.7% of our national income, GNI. So we're going to just post a recording of last month's call in case anyone wants to re-listen to it, just in the chat. If you missed it, it is there, or you can find it from our website, from the events section. Also, as you probably know, you can hardly miss it, and we're expecting the UK budget on the 26th of November, where the Chancellor will set out the UK's overall spending parameters for the next period. But it won't go into any specific detail about the programmes that the FCDO will be able to fund. Over the Oh, thank you. Someone just turned their sound off. That's great. We're still waiting for information from the FCDO about the remaining global health budget for this year and global development budget, which includes things like education. And we're going to continue to pressure them to issue overall envelopes for the next couple of years so that we can continue to get the resources we need for health, education and nutrition programs that we support right around the world. Thank you, as always, for your letters and the responses you've been getting back from the FCDO, particularly on the Global Fund to Fight HIV, TB and Malaria. These letters, which you've shared, all had a common pattern of being supportive of global health efforts generally, pointing out that the government has recently financially supported Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, back in summer, but not committing themselves to the global fund replenishment, which you would not expect at this stage. It's going to be announced, we believe now, just in advance of the G20 meeting of world leaders later this month. So there's not very long before we could wait, not long to wait before we find out how much they're going to put into eradication of those three diseases. The government is co-hosting the G20, the replenishment event alongside the government of South Africa, who are hosting the overall G20 event. And we hope that the Prime Minister himself will be there, although there are no doubt plenty of other issues vying for his attention at the moment. Our Chief Executive Officer, Kitty Airy, has been invited to the replenishment event and should be there representing advocates from UK civil society that have supported the work of the Global Fund for so many years, which obviously includes all of you on this call. She'll be there to meet other NGO representatives from around the world and help to coordinate our response, which we of course hope will be a positive one, though we know that the government has a very tight, money is tight at the moment. In particular, I don't think we've shared this, but we probably should have done. Results has been playing a role coordinating the work of UK and South African NGOs this year, so we'll speak with a common voice. And so we're promoting a coherent message about what we want to see from the Global Fund in the coming years and why its work matters. Some of you may remember that back in September, we heard from a representative of civil society in South Africa. She was called Malalo Marudi, about what they value about the work of the Global Fund in their country, and most importantly, how the fund responds to the voices of the affected communities themselves. And again, we'll share a link to the September call in the chat in case you missed that or in case you want to see what was said about the Global Fund specifically. Next, I'd like to return, sort of going backwards in time here, I'd like to briefly return to an issue that we raised back in August and that many of you took action on, namely the risk of the current very low levels of official development assistance spending which the UK is providing to education programmes. And this theme is something I'm sure we're going to hear more about from one of our speakers this evening. If you remember, we asked you to ask the government to reprioritise education within ODA spending. It's been going down and down over the years, but that's something we've not yet seen any breakthrough on, sadly. UNICEF has recently published a sobering analysis of the current global trends in education spending based on the latest data, which was from July. Now, if you took our August action, thank you for keeping up the pressure on this really important issue. We'll be coming back to it again at some point in 2026. If you're interested to see the latest assessment, that UNICEF report I just mentioned, again, I'll just post that in the chat box. It estimates that an additional 6 million children could be forced out of school by the end of 2026 due to global education cuts. And that's not just down to UK aid, but because of reduced education spending across the board by all donors. So it's a bit of sober news there, I'm afraid. And the report that I've just shared strongly recommends that this decline in ODA for education be reversed. And that aligns very well with what we as Results argued for earlier in the year in order to protect the rights of children around the world to an education, including if they're affected by emergency situations, for example. So I would recommend having a look at it. It's a very short and accessible document and includes some very useful, but as I said, sobering facts and figures. I'm going to leave it there, I think, for now. And again, before we get into the meat of tonight's call, I'm going to hand over to Will for a roundup of your advocacy activities around the country this month. So over to you, Will.
Thanks, Naveed, and good evening all. Hope you're all well. So, yeah, thanks so much for all the work you've done this month. First, I would like to say a massive congratulations to Karen from the Scotland group for some of the media work that she's done. Karen wrote the BBC Today programme, The Guardian and The Telegraph in response to their reporting on the cost of housing refugees in the UK. Karen's articles challenged the cost of putting, the articles shared in The Guardian, The Telegraph and kind of BBC's reporting challenged the cost of putting refugees in hostels, but didn't say that a large proportion of that money came from the international development budget and therefore shouldn't be spent on domestic priorities at a time when the government's budget is under intense scrutiny. This is such a great example of advocacy. And Karen, I was wondering if you're here, is Karen on the call? If you wanted to share your experience of it.
Okay, well, as far as I know, neither letter got published, and I just got an automatic reply from the Today programme. So presumably it's just the people who receive the letters who get to read them. But it was mainly because it's something that sort of really annoys me that they keep talking about taxpayers' money being spent on asylum hotels when, well, I suppose it is taxpayers' money, but it's money that should have gone to the developing world. And it means everybody's people just don't know. And the reputable media companies are not actually making that clear when you would expect a newspaper like The Guardian to actually, in the Today programme, to at least mention that somewhere along the line. But the trouble is with that sort of action, you have to do it very fast for it to even stand a chance of being published. So I was just fortunate. I did have time that day. It's not always possible to actually respond. And I was able to use some of the old material that we had as well. So
well, yeah, it's thank you for that. It's such a great example of advocacy, and you know the power in advocacy, and you know, even though it didn't get published, it's really important to call these things out, because you're right, it's massively missing from the conversation around overspending. So yes, next I would like to flag up a face-to-face meeting in London, which we will be holding on the 20th of November. We'd really like any London-based results group advocates to come along for a discussion on how to develop our advocacy in the capital. So this will be sort of a London group meeting, essentially, that we're trying that we'll be hosting. We'll be advertising it on Meetup, which is this new platform that we've been using. And this will go to, so it'll be seen by new campaigners as well as existing ones. So if you can sign up, and if you're able to attend on Thursday, the 20th of November, please do. And it'd be a great opportunity to kind of meet some fellow campaigners and talk together about how we want our London group to look going forward. Next, I'd like to congratulate Jill for her event last month on the Transforming Finance for Global Development, which she ran for a peace and justice group she is part of. The event covered the issues of debt and illicit financial flows, both of which were taking resources which should be available to countries to fund their development priorities. I think, Corinne, you also attended, and I wonder if either of you would like to spend a minute describing the event.
Okay, I'll do it. Thanks very much to Sunit, who was one of our speakers, who was brilliant as usual. We had a speaker from CAFOD at the beginning. They've got a big campaign about debt. And also in the afternoon, we had Maria Finity, who's the economics person from CAFOD, and she also was excellent. And it was a really good day. We had 6 people on Zoom. We did it on Zoom as well, and we had I don't know, 16 people in the room. So that was good. And I wrote an article about it, which went on Independent Catholic News, and you can see that. But it was a chance for people to talk about the issues, you know, on debt. Sunit, do you want to say anything?
No, just to say I really enjoyed it. It was a wonderful event. I wish I could have stayed for longer, but it was great, as I just said in the chat. It was great to be able to discuss some of the work I've been doing on nutrition recently, in terms of the the good news on nutrition briefing series, some of which I'll be talking about later today, this evening, and also our sort of work on illicit finance, which I'm leading and working a lot on at the moment. So it was great to be able to share that with.
Yeah, that was really clear.
Really lovely
it was great. Yes.
Group, both in the room and online. So yeah, wonderful to do that. Thank you for organising and facilitating.
Yeah, we had people from all over. That was really good.
Well, yes. Thank you very much, Jill. And I think Naveed has just shared your article in the chat as well. So if anyone would like to read that. But yeah, again, amazing advocacy, fantastic. And then lastly from me, just a thanks to everyone who's written to Yvette Cooper so far, either welcoming her to her role as Foreign Secretary or asking her to maintain the UK's funding pledge for the Global Fund. Thank you to the 11 of you who have told us about your letters to her. It's great to be on the front foot with the new Foreign Secretary, so do keep it up. And yeah, so yeah, thanks for all the stuff you've done this month. It's been really great. And then back to Naveed to introduce our speakers.
Thanks, Will. So I'm now, going to introduce the topic for this evening's discussion, which I think is something that many of you will already appreciate very well, which is the disproportionate and different impact of poverty and injustice around the world on women and girls, whether it be in relation to nutrition, education, health, or other issues. Often women and girls have the least access to services or to services that are tailored to their specific needs and are first to feel the impact when issues occur in a community. Now, this is something that international development programs always have to take into account, and many have done for many years, right from the design stage. And in fact, something you may not realise, but this has actually been a requirement of UK law since 2014, that all of the programs we support have to be assessed against their impact on gender equality. I've just seen sorry to break off, just seen a question from Jock on the chat. Global Fund, sorry I abbreviated that earlier. It's the Global Fund to fight HIV, TB and malaria. And it's been around since about the last 20 odd years. And it's a major institution for fighting those three diseases, which governments around the world sign up to. Apologies for not making that clear. So yes, back to gender equality in international development. The law, as I say, has been that you have to look at that in our programs since 2014. And anecdotally, this law was introduced as a private member's bill by former Conservative MP Bill Cash. You may not know that he, as well as being a prominent Eurosceptic, he was also a campaigner for debt relief, and apparently attributed his interest in international development in part to what he'd seen in a program visit with results very many years ago, before my time. So that's an interesting thing that I was told some time ago. Now, we're really only going to be able to scratch the surface of this topic, gender equality, this evening, and it may be something that you want us to talk about more in future because it is really important. So do let us know. One of our reasons for introducing it now is that we know from various sources that this topic is of particular interest to the Foreign Secretary. So it's something that we want to raise with her in order to get her to take a more significant interest in the development part of her portfolio, i.e. the D in FCDO, alongside the diplomacy and other aspects of international relations that the Foreign Office is responsible for. So rather than just give a general overview of this subject, which is vast, we're going to hear from two results colleagues who have something to say about the very specific topics that we're working on, namely education and nutrition, both of which affect women and girls differently and, as I say, disproportionately. Most of you will have met both of them on conference calls before in the last year or so, but if not, they're here now and I'm going to introduce them. They are Hannah Frisch, who is our Senior Policy and Parliamentary Advocacy Officer for Education, and Sunit Bagree, who's just spoken, who is Senior Policy Advocacy Officer for Nutrition. So I see they're both on the call, so welcome both.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, David.
Thank you. Really looking forward to hearing from you. So, yeah, thank you for joining us. We're looking forward to hearing your perspectives on this topic, bearing in mind, of course, that they are just two of the specific ways in which poverty is not gender neutral, but affects women and girls differently. Before we go into our questions for you, for those of you who don't know, for people who don't know you, would you be able to each of you spend a minute or two introducing yourself and just say a little bit about your background? Hannah, can I start with you?
Yeah, sure. So as Naveed said, I am the Education Policy and Parliamentary Officer at Results. So I sit between two different parts of our organization. And I have a master's degree in global education, international education development from the University of Sussex. I have worked in schools with special education students and English language learners, and have also worked with, prior to this job, a global network that was focused on public education, advocacy, and resisting trends of privatization, which can unfairly exclude students, particularly the most marginalized, who can't pay for private services or who needs additional support, like special education students. I'm originally from the United States, if you couldn't tell from my accent, but I've been working here for a number of years, and I support with the APPG on global education, and also do a lot of work with the Semi-Friendly School Coalition, which is the global education coalition of NGOs and teachers unions in the UK. Over to you, Sunit.
Thanks, Hannah. Yes, I think I met many of you before, but perhaps not all. So my name's Sunit Bagree. I am the Senior Policy Advocacy Officer for Nutrition at Results UK. I have been at the organisation since January last year, so coming up to 2 years now. I also lead on a lot of the financing for development work, as I mentioned earlier. And yeah, in terms of my background, so very broad academic background, sort of encompassing economics, international relations, international law. And in terms of my career, I've worked in the sector for over 20 years. And my first job in the sector was with ActionAid, and I spent about half my time with ActionAid, so almost 3 years in total, living and working in the global south, so in West Africa and South Asia. So I have that experience of living and working with activists and program leads and community members in the global south, as well as obviously, spending most of my career based here in the UK, advocating, targeting the UK government and key sort of global institutions. Yeah, so that's me. I'm very happy to be here again this evening. I think it's the second time I've done a talk with our Grassroots Campaigners Network, and I very much enjoyed the first one, so really looking forward to this. Thanks.
Thanks, Sunit. Before we get into our questions for the two of you, I noticed that Will has just put a link to an article that's on the Results website explaining some of the global kind of institutions that we work with, so-called multilateral institutions that we work with that help us support international development efforts around the world in a really efficient way. So apologies to those of you who I kind of didn't really explain some of the stuff earlier in our kind of roundup, political roundup. If there's anything that was a bit unclear, that should give a really good kind of grounding in that. So that's a bit of a lesson for me for next time, but thanks, Will, for pitching in there with that. So we're going to go into our normal process, which just have some pre-arranged calls, which we've suggested that people ask to get us into the meat of this topic, and then we're going to open up the floor to whatever anyone would like to ask. So we've got 4 questions this time, 2 for each speaker. So the first one is for Hannah and comes from someone in the pool group, I believe.
Hello, it's me, it's Helen again.
Hi, Helen.
Hello, everybody. But Hannah, what I'm going to ask you is why access to education is a problem for girls.
Thanks. And just really happy to be here to begin with, because this is a really, really important conversation for us right now. We know that global education is quite likely to be deprioritized as we're coming up to these budget decisions. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity to talk about this. Girls' education is a really big issue in both access, but also in what happens within the school. So there have been a lot of efforts and a lot of progress in closing the gaps in at the initial point of access to education. But once you've got a student in school, it doesn't mean that they're going to be able to stay there. So there's a lot of different parts to this question that are important to address, and it's access as well as quality and keeping people within the school system as they get older. So there are a huge number of reasons that impact inequalities in gender in education, and it depends on where you are regionally. It depends on whether you're in an urban or a rural environment. There's a huge number of things that can be at play that can disproportionately impact girls' ability to access a quality education. But some of the major themes that we see are poverty in general. There's a lot of data on the impacts that poverty have on families and their choices around which of their children go to school. If there are areas where school is not free or freely accessible, It's more likely that a family will send a boy to school than a girl to school. And often in families that require additional support at home because of working long hours and not having the funding to pay for childcare, girls will end up taking on a lot of care responsibilities. There's also a number of other reasons that you might be able to guess. Child marriage is a huge reason. Girls who marry early are more likely to drop out. Girls who get pregnant young are more likely to drop out, and some are even have been until recently. I'm not sure how many countries where it still is the case, but there have been lots of problems with countries actually barring pregnant girls from school. And then once a girl has a child, it's really, really hard to re-enter school. And there's a lot of barriers when caring for a young child and in secondary school in particular. There's also just like some infrastructure barriers. So getting access to toilets at schools is a huge issue for girls that are going through puberty. Unsafe routes to schools and not having transportation can leave girls vulnerable to attacks on their way to and from school. And also unsafe conditions at school. Sometimes there are adults that are at schools that are not properly trained, and there isn't also like the culture of ensuring safeguarding at schools that can prevent girls from feeling like school is a safe space that they can go to. And harassment also from peers can be an issue. So there's a huge number of issues within the classroom, around the classroom, within families that prevent girls from going to school. And we see that in primary level, there's a lot of closer parity in terms of girls and boys going to elementary, primary level schooling. And as girls get older, dropout gets higher and higher. So by the time we get to upper secondary school, which is 15 to 18 years old, typically, the dropout rate is about 82% for girls. So this is a really, really big issue. And it's also something that is heightened during times of crisis. So in crisis settings, girls are nearly 2.5 times more likely to be out of school than in areas where there is not an ongoing crisis. And some of this is because there are increases in child marriage, there are increases in financial burdens, it's more unsafe, as you can imagine, in a conflict setting. So all those things that I just talked about, they become heightened in a conflict setting. And so access to schooling in areas where there are wars or protracted crises, as well as climate disasters, are really, really tenuous spaces for keeping girls in school. You find that during environmental disasters, women and children have mortality rates at higher levels than men and boys. And there's also an issue with inclusion of students with disabilities, where girls are more likely to be out of school if they have a disability than boys with disabilities. So there are a lot of different intersecting things. And also just we're talking about gender in a very binary way, but there's all sorts of ways that gender plays out. And these gender issues, while we're focusing on girls, they also affect boys. And one of the main things that also comes up a lot is the way that the curriculum is structured. It will be often quite gendered and include stereotypes. This teaches children, whether they're boys or girls, about different messages around how to behave and how each gender or should fill roles and what their possibilities are in life. And there are a number of efforts going on to make sure that curriculum actually reaches girls, shows that they're reflected in the stories that are told in different school books, and that they feel like school is made for them. Because there's when we think about schooling and in a one size fits all way, it's usually from a very male dominated perspective, and that sends these implicit messages that it's just not the place for them to be, or it's not a place they're meant to be. And so tackling those aspects that can lead people to feel less encouraged to stay in school are important aspects of addressing this issue as well.
Thank you, Hannah. That's a really comprehensive opening answer. Obviously, there's so many issues there, and we mustn't generalize, obviously. Different things in different places, different parts of the world, so we can unpack that in our questions. But a really good overview of some of the different things that affect people in girls' in access to education in some parts of the world. I was going to move to our first question for Sunit, but I have a feeling it's going to help us all if we have on both topics, if we stick to one topic first and then the second one. So Sunit, if you can bear with us just a second, I'm going to move to our third question rather than our second. So Jill, I think, was that from you? I hope this isn't going to mess things up.
No, I was thinking the same thing. Okay. Hi, Hannah. My question is, what needs to be done to improve girls' education globally?
Thanks. So a lot of the things that can be done are kind of, they're pretty clear links. So for example, with like the transportation issue, making sure that there are safe routes to school can include providing buses, or making sure that there's schools closer to where people live, and that there's enough infrastructure to make sure that students don't have to walk very long distances through dangerous areas by themselves. It can mean eliminating gender biases in curriculum and doing reviews of curriculum, and teaching practices to support teachers to be able to identify gender bias and to make sure that girls are included in discussions and are encouraged to speak out, and are also treated in a way where they're equal to their boy counterparts. It's getting facilities that are going to be appropriate for girls and are safe and separate, so that when they are on their periods, or just in general, like in a space where they can feel like they're able to kind of be safe if they are being threatened by somebody at school. Those kinds of things are all really helpful for making sure that schools stay places where girls can feel supported. And for girls that are pregnant, having facilities to support with childcare, and then also laws that prevent discrimination against girls who are pregnant are really important things to have in place. But one of the main barriers is just the amount of money that is there. And one of the huge things that really is important to tackle is access to free education, because as I said, poverty is one of the main issues in preventing people from going to school. If there's a cost to going to school, whether that be through school fees or for uniforms or books, that is a really, really, really big barrier to girls. And so free publicly provided education is a major thing that we need to focus on. And the reason we're talking about this today in part is because there are two really, really important global funds for education. One called the Global Partnership for Education, which focuses on strengthening systems, national public education systems, to be able to better support students, particularly marginalized students. That includes girls and students with disabilities and students from other marginalized backgrounds. And then there's Education Cannot Wait, which supports school systems during times of crisis and emergencies. So they come in and they provide that support that, as we had mentioned previously, disproportionately impacts girls when there's instability and conflict. So both of these funds, they are instrumental in just adding resources to school systems, but also in building up school systems to be more gender responsive, to providing more access to teacher support and materials and training, to giving countries the fiscal space in their public budgets to also provide some of the wider things that they need to be able to provide, because public services, excuse me, public services in general are really, really important for women and girls in particular. They disproportionately benefit from a strong system of public services. And so making sure that there's public transit, that there's care for people who often are not paid wages, that has disproportionate effect, and that whole society aspect of education is really important for also making sure that the school is supported by the community. So GPE and ECW, they're both coming up for replenishment in 2026. Naveed, I'm not sure if I'm getting ahead of things by talking about this.
Maybe we could leave that there and come back to that.
Sure.
So thank you. I mean, a lot of problems, a lot of concerns, but also a lot of potential solutions, but they will obviously cost some money. We're going to park education for now and move it over to questions for the Sunit. And the first one of those, I think, is from Tony over in Cambridgeshire. So Tony, over to you.
Yeah, thanks. Hi, Sunit.
Hi, Tony.
So my question is, what are the main ways in which health and nutrition services around the world need to recognise the specific needs of women and girls?
Thanks, Tony. I mean, that's a very, very broad question, of course. So I thought it'd be helpful if I talk about two bits of work I've been doing specifically recently that concern pregnant women and girls and women and girls who have recently given birth. So specifically, that's prenatal vitamins and minerals. So that's supplements for pregnant women and girls. And the second example is around breastfeeding promotion and support, hugely important as well. So if I just take both of those in turn and highlight some sort of good practice that I've identified and shared over the past sort of year, 18 months or so. So if we take the prenatal vitamins and minerals first, so this is actually known as prenatal MMS, or multiple micronutrient supplementation. So I'll be saying prenatal MMS a lot, but that's what I mean. It's a single daily tablet containing 15 vitamins and minerals, and it is used instead of the traditional iron and folic acid supplementation. So in Ethiopia, UNICEF and the government of Ethiopia are supporting the use of prenatal MMS among pregnant women and girls who are attending antenatal services in 21 districts across 5 regions of the country. And social marketing and social behaviour change in relation to maternal nutrition, including, but not only, prenatal MMS, and promoting the local production of prenatal MMS, so within the country, are 2 key strategies sort of underpinning this programme. So why is this important? Well, because prenatal MMS provides additional health benefits for newborns compared to the traditional iron and folic acid supplementation. And it even halves the likelihood of children developing non-communicable diseases, NCDs, later in life. And research in Ethiopia specifically, so just in Ethiopia, has shown that transitioning from iron and folic acid supplementation to MMS, the multiple micronutrient supplementation during pregnancy, would, in a 10-year period, prevent almost 20,000 child deaths and generate economic benefits 171 times greater than the costs. So it's hugely cost effective. So in Ethiopia, what have the results been so far? So the programme is on course to reach 400,000 pregnant women and girls by the end of 2025. And introducing prenatal MMS has helped to generate demand for and improve the quality of antenatal services more broadly. It's also helped to improve the integration and delivery of maternal nutrition and other health services. And I think I'll be talking a bit about nutrition later. And it's also helped to strengthen the health system as a whole. So that's one case. The other case is breastfeeding promotion and support in Sierra Leone. And there, the government of Sierra Leone, in partnership with the UN Nutrition Network and Focus 1000, a local NGO network, is communicating exclusive breastfeeding messages, including via community awareness drives and mother-to-mother support groups. Now, the number of those mother-to-mother support groups has rocketed. So they were at around 3,000 in 2014 to over 14,000 in 2020. So training hospital staff and setting up processes to cascade these trainings has also been very important. It's enabled maternal facilities in Sierra Leone to become more trusted centres of breastfeeding. So why is this important? Well, breast milk is nutritious and contains antibodies, which also help to protect babies from infections and diseases. And on top of that, breastfed children also perform better on intelligence tests. What's less well known is that women who breastfeed also have a lower risk of cancer and other diseases. So just sort of zooming out and looking at the global level sort of research, achieving near universal levels of breastfeeding worldwide could save almost 600,000 children from dying as a result of diarrhea and pneumonia, as well as prevent almost 100,000 cancer and type 2 diabetes related deaths among mothers every year, every single year. Absolutely astonishing figures. And here's another one. Insufficient breastfeeding, promotion and support cost the global economy an estimated $507 billion annually. So what sort of demonstrates that Sierra Leone is doing so well? Well, for a start, the country has surpassed the World Health Assembly global target of 50% for exclusive breastfeeding by 2025. So it's already met that target. But even more impressively, Sierra Leone is one of only 6 countries in the global south projected to achieve 70% of exclusive breastfeeding prevalence for babies under 6 months old by 2030. And just to be clear, the World Health Organization recommends that babies from birth to 6 months of age are exclusively breastfed. So that the more the better. And as I said, Sierra Leone is only one of only 6 global South countries projected to achieve the 70% mark.
Sunit, can I move us on to the second question?
Sure.
Because I'm aware of time.
Absolutely.
We've got 2 really brilliant examples there. Those figures kind of speak for themselves about ways in which women and girls' nutrition can be helped. There's obviously a whole lot of other contexts, including the family's ability to have nutritious food from just being able to afford it, the way that agriculture works. But 2 really specific examples there. And for those who haven't spotted it, I put a link in the chat to Sunit's paper earlier this year on that topic. I'm going to move on to a question from, I think, Scotland that follows up the last question.
Yeah, hello, it's me.
Hi, Karen.
Hi, it's Karen. Hi, Sunit. How can the UK make the most of its financial contributions to international development?
Thank you. So again, a very, very broad question. And I thought I'd just focus on one way that it can do that, one of many. And that's integration, which, simply is about sectors collaborating with each other rather than working in silos. So collaboration allows for a range of interventions that address multiple needs to be strategically delivered in a participatory manner. And that's really what's at the heart of integration. And I thought that I could just briefly give an example of this, and just again briefly just raise some of the sort of gender dimensions of this. So in Nigeria, so there's an integrated homegrown school feeding program. So let me explain what that is. That is a school feeding program that sources the food from local smallholder farmers rather than from agriculture in Europe or the US, agriculture which is often subsidized in our country and in other richer nations. But the program in Nigeria doesn't just stop there. It doesn't just stop at and ensuring that the food is supplied from local smallholder farmers for school feeding programs. It integrates that program with school-based deworming, which is providing anti-parasitic drugs to children to rid them of intestinal worms, and water sanitation and hygiene interventions. And the reason for this is because intestinal worms affect school-aged children by far the most compared to any other demographic, and particularly primary school-aged children. And even if you feed them if they have worms, the worms eat a lot of the food. So it's actually sort of a double win, ridding them of worms for general health, but then also if you're going to be providing nutritious meals, then they can, obviously enjoy that to the maximum extent. And water, sanitation, and hygiene, I think it goes without saying, but of course, absolutely cross-cutting to health and well-being. And indeed, if we had universal access to water, sanitation, and hygiene, not only intestinal worms, but actually pretty much all other neglected tropical diseases would no longer exist. They certainly wouldn't exist in the form that they do today, because these are diseases of poverty, not of geography ultimately. So the success of this integrated homegrown school feeding program in Nigeria is remarkable. In 2019, the national government announced the program had helped to increase enrolment in primary schools by over 20% in just 4 years. The program also has significant health benefits for children in terms of better nutrition and lower prevalence of worms. And an interesting research has shown that the households of smallholder farmers who benefit from the program, who grow the food for the school feeding element of the program, that they are twice as likely to be food secure compared with the households of smallholder farmers who do not benefit from it. So in terms of the gender dimension of this in particular, I mean, there are many, but I could just give you a few examples. So, as Hannah very articulately sort of explained earlier, girls are excluded from education in a way that obviously boys do not face. And school feeding programs act, and indeed other school health programs act as a pull factor. So they can incentivize girls, and particularly their parents or carers or guardians, to send them to school in the first place, and can also, of course, not only just help them to learn effectively while they're at school, but can also that incentive system can actually continue and help them to stay in school as well. So that's sort of one area. In terms of the farming and the food preparation. So it's true that many, indeed most, smallholder farmers in the world are women. In Nigeria, the demographics are quite mixed in terms of the farmers benefiting from this program, but in terms of the cooks, who are absolutely key to this program, because someone's got to cook the food, of course, the cooks are almost all women. So in terms of job creation, for female cooks, it's been really tremendous. It's also helped many women farmers, but also many male farmers as well. And another example is, of course, again, as Hannah was saying, that WASH is a major challenge for girls who are in school, but also the lack of WASH facilities can create a disincentive really to attend school for girls. As girls, obviously, it's not just the discrimination they face outside of school and in school, it's also that they have particular needs when it comes to WASH as well. So WASH can be, if done right, it can be very gender sensitive and promotion of equality. And finally, having these sort of multiple interventions delivered in such a strategic way can improve health and well-being, which in turn can lower the burden of care, which, as we know, disproportionately falls on women. And that's obviously not just true in Nigeria and the global south more broadly. It's also true in our own country and many other richer nations around the world. So it's a general global universal truism. So in that way, it can not only help girls in terms of empower them in all the different ways that I've talked about, but women, of course, the farmers and the cooks, but also it can lessen that burden of care because of better health and well-being outcomes for communities.
Thank you, Sunit.
Thanks.
Sorry, I've had to sort of cut you off there a little bit, but I'm aware we've got a little bit of time for questions to unpack a really vast area of work, both across so many issues there across education and nutrition. And we thought, because it's such a big topic, and as we said at the beginning, gender inequalities affect all areas of development, particularly for this group. I know many of you like to get into a lot of detail. We thought we'd dive into some detailed areas, so you've got some specific talking points that you might want to use in your letters. Of course, there are others as well, and that's entirely up to you. And we've shared some links in the chat to some of the resources that Sunit was mentioning, and earlier in the chat I referred to the UNICEF report, which pulls out some of the risks to girls' education that we talked about earlier. And I've also tried to include some references to things that people have mentioned where we've used some bits of jargon. So hopefully this is making sense if you're not so familiar with the topics. So we've just going to open up to questions from the floor for the last kind of 10 minutes or so. As always, you can put them in the chat, or you can just unmute and ask your questions. And we also, if you want to text them for whatever reason, you can put them in a text to me and I can read it out. So it's the number for that is in the chat, but it's 07906 662 571. So multiple ways in which you can get your question out. So let's start off by just opening up the floor to anyone who wants to unmute. I'll just check if we've got any questions on the chat. We've asked for some examples that breastfeeding improves maternal mortality, and Sunit, I think that's one of the examples in your report, isn't it? Your Good News report. I think I've shared the link. Have I got that right?
That's right. Yeah, I mean, specifically, cancer and certain other diseases, are lesser in women who breastfeed, and so yes, the evidence for that is very, very strong, and there are references in my briefing for that.
Does the briefing explain the mechanism how that could be?
No, it doesn't. I mean, that's obviously a medical, issue, but so yeah, I can't sort of go into that. But as I said, for the babies, and again, this is a universal thing. This is of course not just specific to women and babies in the global south, but there's sort of considerable evidence about breast milk being best, in terms of nutrition, and containing antibodies, which help to protect babies. And I think even more amazingly, the studies that have shown that those sort of benefits are sustained over a longer period of time. So hence children who are breastfed doing better on intelligence tests than children who aren't, for example. So yeah, and another important part of this as well then is the regulation of the breast milk substitutes industry, and again, that's been a big issue in our country, in Europe, and beyond, for many years. But there's an international code for marketing of these substitutes, and unfortunately, the breast milk substitute industry has an awful history of trying to hold back progress on furthering, the implementation of the code in practice. One of the reasons Sierra Leone has been so successful is that it's actually passed a very stringent law limiting how breast milk substitutes can be marketed and promoted. So yeah, and I discussed that in the briefing as well. But I also make the argument there's a need to be constantly vigilant, because there are these sort of interest groups that seek to push these products, even when they're not in the best interests of babies and their mothers.
Thank you, Sunit. It's just reminded me that I think the breastfeeding campaign against organisations like Nestle were one of the campaigns I first got involved with back in the 90s, taking me back a bit, and the problem's not gone away, unfortunately. Pete, thanks for sharing a link to the Lancet article about breastfeeding improving maternal mortality. So there's another resource there should anyone want to find out a bit more about that. I'm just checking up the conversation in the chat for any other points that I've missed, and I see that Jill put it in something around just returning to education, something around boarding facilities for girls who live a long way from schools. Is that something you wanted to say something about, Jill?
No, it's just that our sisters in Cameroon and also in India, where you've got girls that reach puberty, they'll drop out of school. So they've got boarding facilities so that they can come as weekly boarders, and it's free, or they just ask them to contribute what they can, even if a few sticks of firewood or whatever the family can afford. And that means that the girls can actually get an education where they have to travel a long way. It's just a practical thing. Can I ask a question? It's a practical question, a logistical question. If the Global Fund it's still a live cause about getting action. I haven't written to my MP about that yet. And looking at this, asking you to write to your MP, I'm wondering if I should be writing that now, just to get it in, because of its impact on women and girls. And then just parking this for a little while, but not doing it. But you know,
Can I come back to you on that? So we haven't talked about the Global Fund's impact on women and girls specifically in relation to its work on those 3 diseases. That wasn't one of the topics we pulled out for tonight. But the replenishment conference is going to be very soon, and we're expecting a UK announcement very soon. So in the time available, we're suggesting that ideally you should write directly to the Foreign Office rather than route it through an MP, who will then have to read it.
Right,
Their office will
okay,
have
thank
to,
you. Yeah.
then transmit the concerns onto the departments. I think for time really is very short now for action on the Global
Okay,
Fund.
thank
But
you.
I'm sure you will find information on their website about their work in terms of gender equality. I haven't researched that for this call, I'm sorry, but do
Thank
have a
you.
look. They're
Okay.
usually pretty good on development topics.
Thank you.
I see we're kind of running out of time, but is there the time for maybe one last brief question for either Hannah or Sunit?
Eric?
Have I come off mute?
Yes.
Oh, right. Okay.
Go for it, Ricky.
I'm not sure this qualifies as a brief question, but we the way that we campaign is always focused on something, nutrition or education or very often health in one form or another. And then almost always when we hear from our brilliant experts on the call, we realise there's a gigantic crossover between all of those topics. So it's hard to campaign in a general way because you're always asking for funding for the global health, so the Global Fund. So that would mean TB, malaria, and HIV, or we're campaigning for the Global Partnership on Education. But it's we always bang our heads on the fact that nutrition feeds into education, education feeds into health, health feeds into kind of water and sanitation, that feeds back into education and poverty generally. So it's more of an observation, really. It's very hard to campaign across the whole board because then you're asking for everything all at once. But it's very hard also to campaign on one issue when and we know, and probably by now the foreign minister also knows, everything feeds into everything else. But
I think that's a really well made point, Ricky. I mean, particularly with gender, it crosses every single thing.
Yes.
And I feel like a little bit we've chosen to raise 2 particular topics tonight, and it could touches on so many other things. See, Sunit has got his hand up, so I'm going to give him the chance of answering this point or referring to it. Over to you, Sunit.
Yeah, thanks. Just to say that the this increased focus on integration, which I think started probably in the early 2010s and has built and built and built, sort of underpinned by the recognition that the potential impact of one set of interventions can be strongly affected by intervention in other areas. As we've just been discussing, these areas, nutrition, health, agriculture, education, and indeed many other sectors are deeply interrelated. So I think I actually see that potentially as a strength, not as a weakness. And I think there are a lot of opportunities, within that sort of knowledge to then further the integration agenda. I also think, though, at the same time that we are able to make specific asks on specific issues. So I think it's a case of make specific asks on specific issues where that makes sense, and then make asks that relate to sort of integration and or other cross-cutting issues like like gender, of course, the topic of today, but others as well. Financing for development, which I know Hannah has a great interest in as well. These sort of cross-cutting issues, you can make asks on those when it's the right time to make asks on those. So I think it's just about being strategic and sort of selecting the right asks for the right opportunities and right moments and prioritizing. I don't really see it necessarily as a problem. I see it as a source of opportunities. Thanks.
Absolutely second that, and I'm glad we've sort of finished on this note. I mean, it is results methodology to make very specific and hopefully doable requests of the British government to help, with their contribution to overcoming poverty around the world. But of course, the topics are vast, and you can dive down rabbit holes. And of course, if you follow any of the links that we've shared, you'll probably find a rabbit hole there that you might be interested in. So I hope it's not too bewildering. And for me, one piece of advice would be, go with your heart, go with what's interesting to you. And hopefully you'll feel able to, or, interested in doing some of the campaign actions that we as results are working on at any given time. I just want to flag up something that Hannah shared. Oh, Hannah, I see your hands up. Was it going to be about the debt event? I'll come to you in a second. Hannah has just mentioned that there's an event coming up through by the Debt Justice campaign group on Saturday the 8th, not very far away, in London, for those of you who can get to it. And I've just put a link in the chat. So going back to the topic we started off at the beginning of the call. Hannah, do you want to come in on something else?
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly, I realize that we're way over time, but just note just with the reason why we're doing this action at the time we are is because budgets are coming out very, very soon. And so it's really timely to be talking about things that are happening in 2026, because decisions are being made like right now about how much funding is going to be given to different issue areas, and that includes these funds. And we're expecting those announcements to happen within a couple weeks, which is why it's so important that this action is happening right now and not later on. But we'll definitely be coming back to both of these issues next year as well. Absolutely.
And thank you for that, Hannah. Yeah, we do try and make sure that the things we're asking you to spend some time on are timely and as possible, and hopefully have the most impact as possible. Thank you, Sunit, for sharing another link there to links between nutrition and the other development goals. So that's another one for you to have a look at. And we will share, when we share the recording of this call, of course, all these links will be in the video description. So if you've failed to grab any of the links from the call, don't worry, they will be available. And lastly, I think this is the last link I'm going to post up. You should have had it by email, but a link to the current action, which explains what we want to do, why, as Hannah was just explaining, gender is a timely thing to talk about now with this Foreign Secretary. And it will, with all of that information, hopefully you'll have more than enough to read, to think about, in order to craft any kind of letter that you feel moved to write to the Foreign Secretary. To your MP. For this one, once the Global Fund thing is done, we've got a bit, obviously the budget is coming up, but we do want MPs to be involved in this as well. So for this one, November action, we want suggesting that you write to your MP, so that the Foreign Secretary, having heard from some of you directly last month, will also be hearing it from MPs, and we'll be getting these messages about development from all sides. Thank you so much for your contributions, Hannah and Sunit. We're just really grateful for your expertise and for giving a tiny taster into the broad, very, very broad and complex topic of gender and development. We do, I think, have the opportunity to follow that up. When I said at the beginning of this call, if there's any other topics that you're interested in relation to gender, we're definitely, it's not our expertise particularly as results, but it's certainly something we think is very important, and would be happy to consider following up if it relates to our kind of policy agendas. So I'm going to finish up now by thanking all of you for spending your time this evening with us on the call. And we need to finish now. So thank you all for your advocacy efforts. I hope many of you do feel inspired to follow up last month's action with a message to your MP. The link I've just shared gives you the kind of bare bones of what we think makes sense right now. And that should hopefully reach her well before her department has started roughing out their spending plans for 2026 and beyond. That goes, obviously beyond this current budget. So as usual, we'll keep the call open after the formal end of the meeting. Sorry, we've run about 7 minutes over. We'll keep the call open for another 20 minutes if you want to stay and chat informally. But if you're not staying, I recognise it's pretty late. So enjoy the rest of your evenings and lovely to see you all.